Some people might say yes, and that we're just biased to think that that's a bad thing. But a lot of us, myself included, take the idea seriously that there has to be some other kind of ingredient. And when I think about this, and I've talked to colleagues and students about this, the thing that comes up most often is that there needs to be some kind of meaning attached to this, that pleasure just isolated from any kind of meaning attached to it lacks a kind of value that we should take seriously. Another way to think about this is in terms of identity. That is, if you said, Josh, I could kill you and replace you with someone who's just like you but a little bit happier. Well, in some objective sense, I would agree that that would be better, but I can't say that that's what I really want. And we face the same question, perhaps eventually on a species level. That is to say, we as a society have to not only ask, would this be better in some impersonal objective sense, but also, would whatever follows from the present state of affairs be in some meaningful sense our children, that it would be a continuation of us, whether or not that ends up being human? Does it in some way carry forward the value and the sort of intellectual capital that we've created? So I think the feeling among the group is that the quality of experience is really important. It's maybe not the only thing, that the quantity of it matters, but quantity can't necessarily make up for quality in every possible way. One upshot of this is that we're not committed to the idea that humans should necessarily be in charge. If putting humans in charge would make everybody miserable, then that would be a bad outcome. But the standard has to do with, at least strongly, what is it like to exist under those circumstances. And another piece of this is that it's a very difficult scientific problem, but down the road, it'll be very important to try to understand what is the relationship between measurable physical things, computations in our brains or in machines, and conscious experience, and the quality of conscious experience. And that's something that we really only are beginning to understand, but those questions are going to become less and less philosophical and more practical as our technology advances.
Thank you, Alan. And we now come back to Alan, armed with this and two more.
Wonderful, thank you.
Tell us why this should be resolved.
So we found ourselves clustered into the group of people who shared the view that humans should continue to exist, which we thought was pretty defensible. So to make the argument now, there's many ways we could approach it, theoretical, philosophical, but I'll make a rather straightforward argument. Yeah. Which is, babies are cute. I think most humans are sympathetic to the idea that humans have value. And so when we're exploring this vast philosophical space of potential value, right, the moral philosophy of what kinds of circuits of happiness or what kinds of transhumanist beings would generate the most value, our group would argue it's important to hold on to the sort of one thing we know with very high confidence, and we see value in humans. And so we're not, in many ways, many of us, I think, agree with each other, and we maybe differ only on emphasis. Our emphasis will be, as we explore the possibilities that AI will bring, the abundance, the new life forms, it's important to make sure we don't lose what we have today. So what we have today are many humans in the world, many of whom lead fulfilling, meaningful, often happy lives, and let's sort of set a welfare floor on that so that, so we don't lose that. So another way of framing it, next slide if you can, Max, is two sort of concepts that are really important to us, and I think actually shared by most people, most of the groups, is humility and caution. So let's be humble about what the future may bring, about the correct sort of values and goals that we should pursue, and then therefore have caution as we unlock all the potential that AI will bring. So AI can unlock vast wealth, health, well-being of all kinds, but it's also going to be a potentially very disruptive technology in transition. And so let's see if there are ways that we can make that transition more secure for all participants in this civilization and those maybe who are along for the ride, the animals. So I think it's a good challenge for us, rather than just agreeing about vague destinations to try and be as precise as we can. So in a risky way, so that we might disagree and find sort of more insight. So to offer a strong version of our view, it is that humanity or the decision makers should work hard to set up a guarantee of welfare, of well-being for all humans. And that will be very difficult, practically, to set up such a guarantee that's actually credible and that's perceived as credible. But the argument in favor of trying is that the upside is so tremendous, right? The upside of building AI and AGI is so tremendous that we ought to put in the effort to try and secure that welfare floor as much as possible. So to offer a few more concepts, and this is actually from a paper with Nick Bostrom, we would like the property to be that there's universal benefits, that all individuals perceive themselves to be improving under whatever trajectory we follow. We would like there to be a welfare floor. And one operationalization of that would be everyone should be able to say, my great-grandchildren should have the option of a life at least as good as mine. And that doesn't mean they have my life. We might have to move matter and space around, but it means if they could say, opt to take our life instead of their life, or the options that they have before them, they could have that option, or they would strictly prefer not to take it because what they have is so much better. And then this last concept is a mouthful, is epsilon magnanimity. And the idea there is that we should be generous with at least some small probability to all possible value systems. As we scale up in wealth, we'll have ever more abundance, and so for a small fraction of total resources, we can provide those resources to resource-satiable values. So that means, for example, for me, I'm resource-satiable in food. I can only have so much food, or so much of many things. And so all value systems that, yes, are resource-satiable as we scale up in resources should be given some consideration. So yes, in conclusion, I think if we can set up such a welfare floor, not only is it probably a good thing for life and for values, but also it makes it much more politically feasible that we'll get there without too much disruption. So if we have such a credible guarantee, we're less likely to have revolutions, wars, and fearful sort of resistance to the great future that is before us.
Thank you. Awesome. And then let's go over to Joshua to hear from the reasonable group.
Right. So I guess we started from the notion that one aspect we should be really careful about is the process by which we govern ourselves and future civilization will govern itself. And in general, I think we agree with a lot of what's been said, but we focused on this aspect, this political aspect. And I think it's important not just to think about this as a future destination, but also about the transition, as you were talking about, because as we know, a lot of the current global issues, whether it's climate change or existential risk, can only be dealt with the right political framework and the right global organization and decision making. So we had a short title for our proposal, which is AGI for political debates done right. So how do we take advantage of the progress in AI, even before we get to AGI, in order to set up a decision-making process and a discourse-based decision-making process that's going to be inclusive, diverse, allow a rational debate leading to a stable and wise society. So we had a slightly longer title for this. Win the wisdom race, what Max talked about, the race between the growth of our power and the growth of our wisdom, with AGI-enabled discourse-based scalable approach, scalable because population is growing and the complexity of the world is growing, to achieving a fair, wise, and diverse society. So one aspect of this, which connects to what has been said before, is the point of view of humility and caution that you raised. Humility because we don't know enough today about what will be the main issues, even the values of our descendants, whether they're human or not. And so it's maybe safer to think about the process by which we can adapt collectively to those changes. And so in a way, we're punting the decisions that some people may be tempted to take today by giving some power to our descendants. And those descendants don't have to be just humans. Of course, this is the thing we know about and we care about. But there might be, in this collective discussions, AGIs, cyborgs, all kinds of hybrids. And there's a notion that we discussed a lot of membership to this collective decision-making, which you can think of the future version of democracy, right? Where it can't be just one man, one vote, or one woman, one vote. Because, of course, some persons can duplicate themselves in this environment. So it's more about which argument people can bring to a collective debate. And then this membership question is about, to be part of this, you have to accept the rules of the game. And the rules themselves can change over time as well. But it has to happen in a stable way with a sort of consensus based on reason rather than sort of majority vote. And of course, we don't know how to do that right today, but where AGI can help us is in setting up that kind of political process, both at the technical level, and this can happen already now by using AI in sociological or political science, but as part of the community of entities which participate in the discussion. So yeah, that's what we're proposing to think about as part of this future destination discussion.
Great. Let's thank And finally, Beth, tell us about why long reflection.
Yeah, so again, I think there's more a difference of emphasis than really like a disagreement with other groups. So we've all emphasized the importance of like humility and reflection, but I think our emphasis is especially that we really don't know what we want, and what we're aiming for in the immediate aftermath of achieving AGI is not to start realizing any scenario that we, might be our best guess as to what is good, but to really focus on building the best possible sort of society and period of reflection to figure out what we should do subsequently. So because it might be, even if we can't say like what we should ultimately do with sort of civilization in the universe, it might be easier to say what is a sort of good process for figuring that out. And this is kind of similar to the like rational debate, or making sure that we keep humans around and don't immediately replace with something that may lack the characteristics we value. So, sorry, I can't really see the slide. So, yeah, and that aiming for this kind of thinking and reflection time might look quite different to aiming for the sort of long-term ideal thing, particularly if we're going for something more like hedonic utilitarianism, where we have like lots of relatively simple beings having very good experiences. They might not be very good at like reflecting on how to structure society. Can I have the next slide? So the sort of things we want are plenty of time to reflect in a stable society without too much conflict, without a risk of destruction, probably without things like hyper addictive, I don't know, like Facebook feeds get so incredibly addictive that humans spend all their time looking at that. That's not like a very good reflective society. Maybe if there are still dangers, we can increase the subjective time for reflection by enhancing humans' abilities and speed of thinking. And we want not just that we have time to think, but we're able to think as well as possible. So we know as much as possible. People are able to experiment, try experiencing different things, in a way that's safe. So I don't know if maybe it didn't come up this time. It came up when we discussed previously, people talking about some kind of market setup to work out which sort of society or setup was best, so where people can choose which kind of civilization they belong to and freely move between them. This might be, in some cases, a good method of sort of discovering in what setups people have the best lives, but you could also imagine there's a danger of, if the way one society operates is to, as soon as people come in, it modifies their brains so they believe this is the best society and that their mission is to get as many other people to join the society as possible. Something you can imagine that would lead to that one succeeding without it actually being the kind of morally best or the most valuable society. So we need to be careful when we're doing experimentation that we don't get some kind of runaway lock-in. Can I have the next slide? So how would we actually use AI to achieve this kind of thing? So we might be able to achieve improved global stability through either something like a kind of singleton or one nation having a monopoly on force to prevent kind of conflicts between competing superpowers, or we might be able to improve diplomacy, cooperation, ability to make sort of credible commitments. There's also a kind of population level where if you address resource scarcity and sort of aggression or like lack of education or meaningful employment, that can like reduce global tensions. And yeah, AI can also, could also maybe be used to increase human sort of ability to reflect. Yeah, I mean, there's still lots of questions about exactly what this ideal reflective period would look like, but I think the main point is it will be easier for us now to kind of think about what is the best sort of society to figure out these questions for us than to figure out these questions and commit to an answer.
Great, thank you so much, Beth. Of our group leaders here, once again for this. Now, a few things that struck me listening to you here was that although there were clear differences between your different visions, to me, every single one of them felt a lot more hopeful and optimistic than what I get to see when I go to the movies and watch pretty much any movie about the future. And to be dystopian, whether it be Blade Runner or Terminator or something else. And I feel that it's much more valuable for people to articulate positive visions, as much detail as they can, than to just make lists of things that make them freak out and then become paranoid, passive, and not do anything. This kind of positive visions immediately leads to some very constructive things one could do next. So one thing one can do, of course, is try to highlight what precisely are the differences here. And even though you heard that there certainly were many, you also noticed a lot of commonalities here. And moreover, I was kind of struck by how I would rather generate a random number between 1 and 7 and just pick that future over what certain powerful politicians are trying to sell me on right now. And so the common core of what you have here is very worth looking into. So what I did with the help of my colleagues here was take some of the words that kept coming back again and again today and yesterday and put them in the blue slogans here on the left side. And here on the right side you see various more concrete spellings out of what those things might mean. Some of you in the audience might think many of these are good ideas, and some of them are bad ideas, and some of them could be made into good ideas if one articulates them more carefully. This is an exercise we're going to have more fun engaging in this afternoon and later on in the conference, and I hope also over lunch in our various discussions. Because the more of a positive vision we can articulate, right, the greater the chances that we can get there. And this provides very good input to the technically safety, and particularly the strategy discussions we're going to have here, because the strategy is generally about how to accomplish things. And the more you know about what you're trying to accomplish in the long term or even in an intermediate term, the better place you are to formulate good strategies. So I would like to thank you all again for putting all this work into this, and let's all do that.